After Raiders of the Lost Ark had come out in the meantime, in between Star Wars, in between Empire and Jedi, George wanted to change the script that we'd kind of worked out, or the story idea when the script was being written, to have more action and less resolution of the primary stories. And I didn't really want to, it didn't seem like much of a challenge to do another attack on another Death Star and to do things that we'd already done before, rather than take the story off in a different direction. That was coupled with the fact that Jim Henson, someone I'd worked with back in the Muppet Show days, and who I brought in to help with the Yoda development, and Frank Oz ended up actually puppeting Yoda in Empire and Jedi. Jim Henson had this project that he'd been working on for 10 years called The Dark Crystal. And originally he asked me if I'd produce it for him, and I said, well, it'll have to wait until the Star Wars films are finished. And then he came back and said he really wanted to do it now. And that, coupled with the fact that I didn't like where the script was going for Jedi, helped decide me that I would rather work on a new challenge, something that had never been done before. So I did The Dark Crystal. I think George was comfortable not directing Empire, but I think he had in his mind that Star Wars was difficult for him to direct, and he liked the idea of shaping the original plan on how a picture gets made and then handing it off to someone else to direct. But I also think that he envisioned that he could somehow direct by remote control, in a way, by kind of keeping his hand in on telling the director what to do. It didn't work with Kirshner. He didn't like that. And so on Return of the Jedi, he hired Richard Marquand, who he felt was a little more amenable to that approach. And I wasn't around for much of that except for some of the early days. So I'm not sure how that relationship actually worked out, but some of the production people said that it was that Marquand did a perfectly good job, and that George was around more than he was on Empire. I think the elements that were there in the outline were ones that that allowed the characters to kind of reach a kind of natural conclusion. There was Han Solo was going to be killed in a raid, and the Princess Leia would have to decide in the story to take over the mantle of the leader of her people, or what was left of her people, and therefore go off on her own, really, and or was leaving Luke on his own, I suppose is the best way to put it, to kind of ride off into the sunset like Clint Eastwood does, and to see what would happen to his life in the future. It was slightly more bittersweet than what happened. And the fans argue about this all the time. Whether it would have been any better or not is impossible to tell, because it wasn't made that way. And it would have been probably less out-and-out heavy-duty action and a little more character developed. That's true. And for those who liked that in Empire, that's what they wanted to see. But for those who liked the original Star Wars, they liked the way Jedi turned out. So that you're always going to get that argument between those groups of fans.